Gary in Portland. Hey, Gary, what's on your mind?
Yeah, Tom. I'm really, really sick of hearing, the free market apologists constantly calling for free markets, but never talking about the issue of competition.
Right.
You can't have free markets without competition. If you have free markets without competition, you get the six banks like we've got, now, monopolizing the banking industry.
Well, this points out the stupidity, frankly, of the phrase free markets, because as economists going all the way back, I mean, you could argue that Aristotle wrote about this. Certainly Adam Smith did in 1773 in his book on moral certainties, what is it? And in any case, and 1776 in Wealth of Nations, that in the absence of regulation and in the absence of anything to prevent it from happening, corporations or even individuals engaged in business, once they get a significant competitive advantage over others, will use that to destroy others, and the middle-sized fish will eat all the little fish, and then the big fish will eat the mid-sized fish, and then eat each other until there's basically just one or two or three big fish left, and that's it. And so the very nature of a free market is to produce monopoly all the time, every single situation, and that's what we have. And you're absolutely right, Gary. These guys who are running around going, "Oh, we got to have free markets. We need more free markets. Free markets are going to save us." This belief system that free markets are somehow the solution to everything it was a dream, a fantasy of Milton Friedman's back in the 1920s and 30s. At the Chicago School of Economics, Milton Friedman was saying, voting is very inefficient. Every 2 years, citizens go and they elect an official, and so it takes 2 years for the will of the people to be made known in a worst-case situation. On the other hand, any instant, there's millions of transactions happening all around the world, and if you could simply measure those transactions or get some kind of sense of them or see how things are flowing, those transactions are consumers making choices, and which is true. But then he took it to the next step, Milton Friedman. He says, and therefore, this behavior of markets is a truer indication of people's desires, what they really want, than is voting. And in that ideology, which has come to be embraced by people like Emmett Tyrell, who calls himself a conservative, and I would say, Barry Goldwater's rolling over in his grave, by embracing this libertarian philosophy, this neo-Friedmanism, what they are saying essentially is that you and I aren't citizens, we're consumers. And our thoughts about politics and how a nation should run don't matter, it's what we buy. And the only real arbiter of how a country should be run is how its markets are run. And if that's the case, then who do you put in charge of the country? The people who are playing in the markets. So let's turn the country over to the corporations. Let's have a CEO president and a CEO vice president. Isn't this starting to sound familiar? Sort of like the Bush administration. Yeah, we're going to have a CEO president. George Bush and Dick Cheney bragging about the fact that they were the first CEOs who were president and vice president and that they were going to run the country like it was a business. They did. They ran this country just like Enron. And here we are. And all the more the disaster. Robert in Marsden, Florida. Hey, Robert, welcome to the program.
Yes, hello, Tom. They're talking about foreign trade and everything and how to tax the rich and everything. Everything that comes in this country from China or whatever, now corporations are using the excuse it's from over there. Why don't we charge, it'll scare the American public at first, charge the corporations or anything coming in this country $1 on the dollar for every item that comes in. That'll go for roads, hospitals.
You're talking 100% excise tax. Or 100% import tariff, rather.
Right, and it might hurt us for a while, but that'll also bring jobs back to the country.
From the founding of this country, well, really from 1793 up until the 1980s, the average tariff on imported goods in the United States wandered around but always within the range of 20 to 40%.
Right.
Smoot-Hawley took it from, as I recall, 31% roughly to around 34%, and everybody got hysterical about that. And that was, by the way, on the Hoover administration. It had always been there. And Reagan started the process of deconstructing that, and Clinton finished it off with the WTO and NAFTA and GATT. And now we actually still have import tariffs, and we still have tables. There's 20-some-odd thousand items listed in the tables. You can find them over at the Department of whatever it is that administers this, Department of Commerce, I think. But the average import tariff in the United States now is around 2%. And that is the problem. And I would say that, if we did a 100% import tariff, you would be guaranteed a trade war, and it would be a disaster. It wouldn't be good for us, and it wouldn't be good for other countries, particularly over the short term, since we can no longer manufacture any of our military weaponry. We don't without Chinese parts. We don't make our clothes anymore. They're made most of them in Southeast Asia. I mean, if we were cut off, we would be in really bad shape. It wouldn't be like World War II, where we could simply have clothing factories start making uniforms, and places that make ladies' nylon start making parachutes, and places that make cars start making tanks, because we don't make any of those things anymore, to the kind of extent that we used to. But a rational increase, and Robert, thank you for calling and raising this, a rational increase in the cost of imported goods so that they begin to reflect the unfair differential of emerging countries in terms of labor markets and in terms of the fact that they don't enforce their environmental laws, so it's cheaper to operate in those countries because American transnational corporations can dump the cost of pollution, the cost of cancers, the cost of environmental destruction on the local people in China and in Vietnam and in Malaysia and on and on. That would reflect those actual environmental and labor costs. We'd probably end up back with at least a 20% import tariff. And I guarantee you, when we have a 20% import tariff, we're going to have jobs in America again. Lynn in Glendale. Hey, Lynn, what's up?
Further on what you're talking about leveling the playing field on imports, I had the idea that if on the balance sheets and the tax forms for the corporations, any item that could have been produced here, and you're probably better at figuring out what that is, cannot be deducted, cannot be included in reducing taxes. So whether it's payroll taxes for overseas employees, in other words, the only thing that they can deduct is legitimate business. You
know why we didn't have an income tax until 1913 or 1918 or whatever the year was, the 19-teens?
You tell.
Because import tariffs paid for the cost of government. From the time of the founding of this country until the Civil War, 100% of the federal budget, the salaries of every senator, congressman, the president, the cost of federal government, the Supreme Court, the whole federal infrastructure, 100% of that was paid for by tariffs on imported goods. From the Civil War until World War I, 2/3 of the cost of government was paid for by tariffs on imported goods. And from World War I to World War II, 1/3 of the cost of federal government was paid for by tariffs on imported goods. Now it's down around 1%. It is virtually non-existent. So you're right, Lynn. And if we were to go back to a tariff-based system and say, if you want to import goods into the United States, that's fine. Hewlett-Packard, you want to build printer factories in China and bring your things in here. Apple, you want to build your computers in China and ship them out of Shanghai by FedEx. That's fine. You can do that. But as soon as they hit our shores, there's a tax that reflects the lowered cost of labor that you had there. And I guarantee you, lickety-split, those companies would be hiring American workers and building American factories.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Up next, more news and your calls at 866-987-THLM. Drop by our new and improved website, ThomHartmann.com.
From the war against disorder, from sirens night and day, from the fires of the homeless, from the ashes of the gay. Democracy is coming to the USA.
Welcome back to the True People's Media, the Thom Hartmann Program. By the way, in what looks to be another sign that the Arctic is heating up quickly, British explorers in Canada's far north reported today that they had been hit by a 3-minute rain shower over the weekend. The rain fell on the team's base 2,420 miles north of Ottawa. I mean, this is up near the North Pole. Penn Haddow, who's the team's expedition director, says